Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address titled The Hughes Era. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with pucksandpitchforks.com editor-in-chief Nick Villano, as we're streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Primetime Radio Network. Oh boy, do we have a great podcast for you tonight. We have from Inside Hockey, Take Two, Neal McHale coming on, and also from Evolving Wild, Josh Younggren as well, piping him in through a video feed through the magic of technology. Nick, how are you tonight?
Listen, I'm not $64 million richer, but I feel like I'm about $64,000 happier because of that Jack Hughes contract. I feel like, a contact high from that contract. I'm so excited that, there are so many people in the fan base and outside the fan base that says Hughes is just going to sign a restricted free agent tender. He's going to go somewhere else. He's going to get out of New Jersey. He loves it here. He said it himself. What's not to love about New Jersey? Well, besides the taxes, I don't like those. But everything else about New Jersey.
But he's got so much money that he can pay the taxes easily.
I made a joke that he asked for that $2 million signing bonus in that first year just because he needs to find a house to not live with Ty Smith anymore. He needs to. It's hard to find real estate in New Jersey right now. It's expensive. You need an influx of cash, Sam. Where are you going to get? He's worried about interest rates, so he doesn't want to get the mortgage. He wants to pay cash. But anyway, no, I think. I mean, what did you think of the contract? You're not a guy who talks money a lot. So I wanted, are you excited that he's locked up? Do you think that they're taking too? I mean, it's a risk. It's absolutely a risk. You can't take that away from it. It is a risk. But weird thing. I wore the Christmas jersey. It's my ugly Christmas sweater for the first podcast of December. I feel like in the camera it looks like a Colorado jersey, though. I don't think the green's coming out too well. But this is my ugly Christmas sweater because it's got this jerk on the back. So that's why it's ugly. But I had to bring out the Christmas since I don't wear it that much. I wear it for the Christmas episode, but I figured first week of December, it would also be a good time to wear it.
Well, I got my old school 29 Brodeur jersey, right?
Yeah, the 29
Christmas
Brodeur,
tree.
yeah.
I got the original black practice jersey right next to it. And I got my other tenure jersey for being a season ticket holder with the New Jersey Devils. All right, so getting back to Jack Hughes, you asked me a question. Money-wise, I think for all parties involved, Jack Hughes, New Jersey Devils, the fan base, I think what the Devils did here was showed the fan base we're serious about winning. We're serious about the future. We're not going to nickel and dime Jack Hughes, and Jack Hughes wasn't going to nickel and dime the ownership group. I think the feeling was mutual. I think Jack Hughes is very happy here. I think Jack Hughes was ecstatic when his brother Luke was drafted. Jack, it's really about family at this point. And it seems like the fans love Jack Hughes. Jack Hughes loves the fans. The stick toss that Jack Hughes invented, per se, as a walk-off celebration in overtime. He goes down with injury, but the way the Devils probably treated his injury, they didn't rush him back, and they took their time with him. And I think with all these things, why not sign an extension? Nothing's guaranteed in life, but right now he's got a guaranteed $8 million a year for the next 8 years after this year. And he knows his brother is in the pipeline, doing very well. He also knows that this team is looking very good, and he's going to be playing with Dawson Mercer for quite a while. Dougie Hamilton locked up. So it shows that the ownership group, after starting the rebuild, very cutthroat and the lowest payroll in the NHL, it showed that to the fans like me who would say, spend money. You've got lots of it. It shows that they are conscious with their wallet in terms of long-term planning, not being just a bunch of cheap owners of the team.
Yeah. I think that and the thing is that, and I'm seeing that on News 12 New Jersey today. I didn't read it, so probably this is bad journalism on my part. But somebody ranked the Devils as the worst hockey experience for fans. It's probably one of those dumb voter ranker lists that like nobody really pays attention to. But sometimes these news organizations, and I work for one, so I could say this, but sometimes these new organizations pick them up and kind of run with them. And it's a great headline. But I don't know how you call the Devils' experience one of the worst in the NHL, especially this season. At least it's fun hockey. If you talk about last season or the season before, it was disjointed and terrible. But I don't think the experience has ever been bad. You know what I mean? It's definitely not like, I've been to Florida. That place is a rough experience with that arena. There's just not a lot they can do. And we've been to Amalie, and Amelie's fun. But I like maybe it's my bias, but I like the Jersey thing better. And I think that is what they're taking into account with this contract. I see a lot of people comparing this contract to other contracts, like Trevor Zegras in Anaheim. They're like, well, is this what Trevor Zegras is looking at? No, Trevor Zegras isn't the number one marketable star on that team. He's not the guy that they're building around. He's a great player. He is, and he's a great young player, and he's somebody who could become a star. But Jack Hughes is a star. Like, to be a star, you don't have to score 100 points or get 30 goals. To be a star, you have to be a star. Like, it's like one of those things, like, I know it when I see it. And Jack Hughes is a star. Like, everybody in hockey knows his name. A lot of people outside hockey knows his name. He's got a Gatorade sponsorship. I don't know what he's really done with it yet. Personally, I haven't seen a lot with that. Have you, Sam?
No, I have not.
But I don't want to change behind the scenes stuff.
I don't want to change the subject here, but that contract, $8 million a year. Mm-hmm. Some would say that Jack Hughes may have left money on the table. Someone like me thinking, the agent, why would you negotiate this during an injury? Why would you do something like that? But this tells me Jack Hughes is very serious about Jack Hughes winning, leaving money on the table, because this is a salary cap structure that the NHL has with the CBA.
Yeah.
Jack Hughes could easily make $10 million, possibly $12 to $13 million, had he just waited per year. But he went with the guarantees, which I respect, but he probably went with the guarantees knowing that there's a mutual understanding with Tom Fitzgerald, the organization, and the Hughes family. We're leaving a little room for you to pay other players to come in, so Jack's not wasting his time in New Jersey. So you got to think of it that way as well, because it's about winning at this point.
Yeah, no, and I think that, and that was the thing with Taylor Hall. For the longest time, it's just, we're just waiting. We're waiting a little longer. We're trying to see what the right fit is. The Ray Shero thing was just, the way the negotiation went down with Taylor Hall was just god-awful. And we just didn't want that. And we saw it happen with Quinn Hughes. We didn't want that either, what happened in Vancouver with his brother Quinn.
Yeah.
I think he saw that too. I think that impacted him. And we're going to get Neal McHale on the phone in just a moment, just to kind of ask him about the contract and about the
just
team
getting
too.
it set up right now.
Oh, no, you're fine. I'm just letting people know what's coming. I'm letting them know it's coming. We got more coming for the fans. No, we had, I think that negotiation with Quinn Hughes absolutely impacted him and impacting what he wanted to do with this contract. He got a little bit more than Quinn. I think he's a more profitable player than Quinn. You look at where the Vancouver Canucks are, they have their marketable star in Elias Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes is a great player to complement him. Jack Hughes is the marketable star in New Jersey, and players like Nico and Jesper Bratt, Alexander Holtz, Mackenzie Blackwood, even Dougie Hamilton is here to complement Jack Hughes. I know not Hamilton is making more money than him. That's how unrestricted free agency works. It's a little bit different. But when you look at how it works with these stars, to get a star for $8 million. That's why what the Toronto Maple Leafs did was so egregious. It's one thing to pay John Tavares because he was an unrestricted free agent and he's also a star. And then it's another thing to pay Austin Matthews, who is their star, on the cover of the video game, on the cover, he's the guy they put on the front. But when you pay Mitch Marner what you did, that's where you get in trouble. And I like Mitch Marner. I think he's a great player. But when you pay the guy who's not your star, that's when you start to get in trouble. And the Devils aren't doing that. They didn't pay Jesper Bratt star-level money. They didn't pay even Nico. Nico got, I'll give you this. Nico got unrestricted free agent money for when he was signed. And they wanted to lock him up. And that contract is, it's a slight overpay still. And I don't think we expected that to be the case. But it is what it is. I don't mind paying first of all, I don't mind paying anybody because we have cap space. If we were up against the cap, it'd be a different story. Even if you pay, like, look at some of the other situations around the league. Look at what the Rangers are going to be looking at with Panarin and Zibanejad just next year. They're in a lot of trouble with the cap. And they got to pay Ryan Strome and Kakko and a couple other players. So that's they're in much bigger trouble than the Devils. Obviously, they're coming out to a much better start. But I think the contract we're in pretty good shape. But Sam, you're back already.
I'm back already because we got a new phone system. I was just explaining that to our guest who was a victim of our last phone system that crapped out and died. So I apologize for that. But he said, don't worry about it. His name is Neal McHale, good friend of the podcast. He's a Devils writer at Inside Hockey. You can find him on Twitter at Neal McHale. Neal, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight, bud?
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Hey, we're doing good, Neal. It's so great. I'm so glad to finally have you on again. It's felt like it's been forever because it has, because we screwed up. But we're going to rectify the situation tonight, Neal. We're going to fix this. But no, I'm so happy to have you on. I'm happy to have somebody who's close to the Devils and has been watching all year on the same night that Jack Hughes signed the deal, because there's a lot of reaction. There's the analytics reaction. There's and then there's the fans. The fans are sitting here and they're elated. They're happy that somebody is so happy to be here that he signed here for 8 years. And then there's the analytics reaction. I kind of want to know what was your reaction when you saw the price, $64 million over 8 years. What price? What was your reaction to that price?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to finally hear you guys as well too. But no problem from the last time around. My reaction to it, when we first, heard rumblings about it, credit to Kevin Weeks for, being a big, showing that alumni can scoop quite a bit here. But he's done a fantastic job with that all year. But my initial reaction to it was that, the Devils are very much deciding that we are going to bet on this young core. And we're going to build on this, so they did it with Nico Hischier and giving him the, a deal that I think garnered some criticism at the time when they signed it, because, it was signed very early and it was for a lot of term, for a lot of term and a lot of cash. But, they're taking a bet on their guy, and they're doing the same thing here, I think, with Jack now. And, you mentioned the analytics side of it. This is an organization that has no shortage of analytic voices in there, and it certainly seems like under this regime they have, a nice say, right over to the ownership group and Tom Fitzgerald, and Tom Fitzgerald even yesterday made a point of saying that he likes to lean on his staff in terms of identifying talent and finding the different ways that can make this organization move forward there. So my initial reaction is that, it's a big financial, a really big deal that they're going to offer to a player who, has only played, I think under 200 games now. But, you look at it and you also say that this is a team that's betting on the pieces that have to be their cornerstones if this team is to take that next step. This team does not take another step if they, don't get that next year out of Nico Hischier. They don't get that next year out of Jack Hughes. And, so in a lot of ways, they're making a big time bet on it too. But, if you also look at some of the figures around the National Hockey League and, when Jack Hughes hits, his 23, 24, 25 season, and the fact that they're going to have him at an $8 million figure and the cap might be rising and you might have, you might even have wingers hitting that $9.5 to $10 million range. And now here you are, you have, two centers on your team that are locked under, at 8 million and 7.25. I think it's a really positive step in the direction. Make no mistake about it, though. They are putting a lot of faith into these two young players. But, at this point, that's going to be the direction of this team. And they know it, and they made a big guarantee.
So we were talking about the marketability of Jack Hughes and kind of how the Devils have made him their marketing maven. They made Nico the captain, and he was here first, and he was their first overall pick. He's maybe had a little bit more production when it comes to points and kind of that, putting it on the table. But how much do you think like the marketing side of things have come into this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can make big time decisions entirely on that, but I mean that's the era though of these kids though, right? And the fan base, you want to have a younger fan base and bring in more people. And that's the thing about Jack Hughes. I mean, he is somebody who I think you can realize whether it's on the ice. I mean, we had it in the first game. He throws a stick. I mean, a lot of reasons why you didn't see that in the past. But when do you recall the last time you saw a player doing that in general? He's part of this new wave of players, but at the same time too, he has a serious tone. I mean, the last thing he wanted to talk about last night after the game they had was, his contract, because the team had just, had a game in which they didn't play particularly well. But he is one of these players that wants to be fun. The marketability of it, I think it's part of it with Jack is that he really does. He's this very calm, laid back personality, but at the same time, he's a very confident player, and he, does take that approach like he's here and he's here for business. And I've had a couple of conversations with him. Obviously now with everything going on, the locker room access is restricted. You don't get a whole lot of those one-on-one conversations, but when I've had him with him, he's a very, down to earth person, but he's also somebody that's straight to the point. Like, we want to get to business here. I mean, he recognizes the situation the franchise has been in, prior to him coming here, and, the situation they're in now where they're trying to grow and build something there. But, as he said yesterday, this team can't just, be a team that's young and exciting. They have to be a team that's young, exciting, and getting better game by game. So I think the marketability of him, sure, that's great. But I think they look at his marketability as the fact that, he can be a really dynamic center in this National Hockey. That's how I think the team looks at it, is that this is a player that could be in this league.
Absolutely. I think we lost you in the last 5 seconds. What was that last sentence you said, Neal? That I think he could be maybe one of the premier elite centers in the National Hockey League. Okay, yeah, and I agree. I think that the projection of the contract, and I think that this is where a lot of GMs are learning, is that they are paying for future performance instead of for past performance. And I think that's what you're seeing Tom Fitzgerald do a lot. I think even his predecessor, that's something that he probably learned from Ray Shero. Because Ray Shero always try to pay for future performance. So I got to give him props there. Of course, he then traded for PK Subban, so that kind of threw that out the window. But again, he didn't sign the contract to Subban, so I can't give him that any pain for that. But I will say the one thing that's been sticking out for a lot of people is that, he made it a point to say that he loves playing in New Jersey. It's one thing. I've heard a lot of players, past, present, and probably will hear a lot of people in the future if this team gets good, saying they love playing for the Devils. It seems like the franchise is getting love, but the location doesn't always. It seems like that's changed. It started with Dougie. Dougie Hamilton was the first guy to say, hey, I love thinking about playing in New Jersey. And then we get the same thing from Jack Hughes, who, and with the New Jersey that says Jersey on it, there's a lot of focus on New Jersey as a location beyond just the Devils as a team. What is your thoughts on how people are going to view playing in New Jersey in the future? It used to just be a suburb of New York, basically, but now maybe it's kind of taking a step on its own.
Yeah, well, absolutely. At the end of the day, I think the product is always going to be what has to speak for itself here, and the fact that this team has a young core, and you're seeing pieces. I mean, Dawson Mercer, for example, a young piece who I don't think people thought was going to be this good this early. But you're also showing that the ownership group here is willing to make an investment. They sign a guy like Dougie Hamilton. They make the signings like we have with Jack and Nico, which shows a big part of that too. But the appeal of Jersey, I think, it is there. I mean, you think about it too. If you're in New York City, I mean, unless you're one of the premier New York Rangers, it's pretty easy for a lot of players on that team to hide out anyway. But now you look at it here in New Jersey, and it's a situation where you are not right in the focal point. I think for some athletes in some sports, sometimes that is something that they want. That is something that you desire. You want to be in the spotlight. You want to be in that big market. You want to have that big stage. But hockey players, I think we realized that a lot of them just want to get right to business. They want to play their games. They want to have their success on there, and fan interaction, fine, but having this stage and having a million microphones in front of them every day is not necessarily something that a lot of them are comfortable with. Now, Jack is a pretty confident player. I think he's somebody who can handle it better than a lot of players, and particularly players his age. But it does seem like a lot of these players are looking at it and saying, yeah, you know what, I can hide out a little bit here. We have ownership group that puts a lot into the franchise and is looking for success of the organization. I mean, we all know that they're getting involved in other ventures in sports. I mean, they've been involved with the Sixers since prior to the time with the Devils. They've also taken a minority stake in the Steelers, and I think they're probably just the beginning of that. And that's a trend we're seeing more in sports anyway. But all of that, I think, is showing that this is a spot where you can have the success on the ice, but then when you go off the ice, I mean, Tom Fitzgerald called it a hidden gem. There really is a lot to like about it too. I mean, beautiful suburbs. I mean, even I'll tell you what, walking out of the rink last night to the parking lot, I was just taking a look at, how much since, I remember just being a kid walking to that arena and everything was under construction and it was really just coming alive. But now it feels like the financial district and everything down there has really come together quite nicely. You have, different restaurants moving in there that always seem to attract fans before and after games. And they had the park where they had knocked down that, right across from the rink. And they had a whole Christmas display up there. And I said, wow, this is, really pretty. Like, I mean, and again, I know those are little things, but it's just something where I look at it and I go, you know what, this is really nice for, the players to see that it's not just, because dating back to the time with the Devils, you were kind of, you were at the Meadowlands, you were right there across from the stadium, and you went home. There wasn't a whole lot of attractions outside, but they're kind of building toward that too. And that's something I think that fans recognize too, is that, New Jersey is making an effort on every part of this organization, including the outside of it too. And I think players recognize that too and want to come here and, be part of the team.
Yeah, we have this pregame place that we do, Taj Lounge 971. That's kind of a new restaurant too, and they've done a really good job of kind of it changes the ambiance to have those restaurants, to have those places to go for fans to to make it a 5 to 10 o'clock thing instead of a 7 to 10 o'clock thing. That's important, and that means a lot. And I do think players notice that a little bit, maybe not a ton. Maybe not. Maybe that's not why a reason somebody would sign here. But once they're here, it might be a reason why they like it here. So I definitely think that helps. I kind of want to pivot a little bit, Neal. You were coming a little bit towards the end of this, but I do want to ask about the on-the-ice play. You've been watching the Devils this season. They literally go from unbeatable superstars like they were against Philly to unwatchable against San Jose. That game sucked. Sorry to be so blunt, but what do you see with this team? Why are they Jekyll and hiding it.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a really interesting, last night's game, in particular, they had this relatively strong first period. You have a goal scored there that, you can look at and say it was a little wonky, a little fluky there. And it just seems like they've gotten into these patterns at times where they have these strong first periods and maybe they don't score or maybe they get scored against. And it seems like it deflates them a little bit much. And then you have these difficult second periods for them because they're still so deflated with that. And you get to the third period, you get a push. You saw one last night, and I'm thinking back to the, game when they had versus Minnesota where they had such a strong first period. And then the second period, they were so flat. And then the third period, they found a way to rally and tie and bring it to a shootout. But, it just seems like that's one of the patterns that they need to work on is finding a way to not get frustrated when they score. And Lindy talked about it yesterday. This team has to find a way that, not to get so down on themselves when they're not scoring and they're creating opportunities. Because then they're putting all the pressure on them to have these, it got brought up yesterday. I think they have, I'm actually looking at it right now, 12 goals in the first period and 30 goals in the third period, which is great. You want to be able to score, when it matters in third period, and that can be some big time goals here. But, when you're not involved in these 1-goal games and you're beating yourself up because, you have a first period that you don't get rewarded for, you have to find a way to just keep carrying on that play. And I think too many times this year, when they're not at their best. I mean, in Philadelphia, it seemed like it was just a perfect game from start to finish. They found a way to connect. They found a way to, get work for their opportunities, earn more. They have to be in a spot, too, where they have these first periods, and maybe they don't get rewarded for it in the first, but they can find a way to keep creating them and then get rewarded for it throughout the rest of the game. And I think that's, again, this is still a young team. It shouldn't be an excuse, but it is something where, you have to build in that mentality there of not getting too low just because, you're hitting posts left and right, or, you created 3 great opportunities and you had all the time in the zone, and then they get in on the zone and then their first shot, it goes in. I mean, because that can be something that I think gets a little too ingrained in their mind is like, hey, they scored and, it's all downhill from here. You don't want that to be a thing too. And you also don't want your team, to be in a spot where they're just, going completely all out every third period and not giving themselves a chance, because you'll tire out quickly. This team has not played like a lot of teams in the league, a whole lot of back-to-backs. But I can tell you when those back-to-backs start creeping up and you have those kind of third periods like that, it's going to hurt you in the next game.
Neal, real quick, I've had trouble figuring out what's wrong with Ty Smith. It's frustrating. If he was what he was last year, I honestly think the Devils have 2 more wins under their belt. There's just something wrong. What is that what you're seeing? Are you seeing just kind of a player who's just not playing up to his potential?
Yeah, I think part of that is probably true. I think you look at a little bit too with the fact that, he didn't, start the season off there. I mean, had a little bit of a, a slow start, had to, miss some time beginning of the year. And that does take a, bit of time to get back into there. The other factor too is that this team has other options on defense, and, he is seeing, some at times his ice time go down a little bit there too. And I think for a young player, I mean, let's just think about what Ty Smith was. He was a dominant player in the Western Hockey League. Was playing, half the game, for those teams. Then he comes in, he has a really strong rookie season showing, and, but now he's in a spot too where there's some depth on this team. I mean, you reference, the contract of PK Subban, but there's been a lot of nights where PK Subban has with lesser minutes has done pretty well for himself there too. You have Dougie Hamilton coming in. Damon Severson, when he came back, he played strong. Even Jonas Siegenthaler, he's another player who, had a full camp with this team and was able to kind of establish himself. And, I just thinking back to, watching Colton White when Ty Smith was a healthy scratch. And, he had a pretty strong game for himself defensively too. And he's another player that, that, can provide, some puck mobility as well. There's just a lot of options on this team that maybe they didn't have last year, or at least not on a consistent basis. And I think it's a little tough for a player like Ty Smith to realize, you don't have to do everything on those shifts that you get, because more often than not, when you're a player like him that has his abilities and you try and do too much, you can get burned with it a little bit. So I think it's just a young defenseman that has to find his way a little bit. He's got time to figure it out. He's certainly a player that has the skill set to do it before. I mean, I don't think you look at a season like he had last year and it just goes away. But he's certainly a player, I think, that a little bit hurt from the slow start and, not being with the team right away. And then also the fact that there's just some depth on this team, and he's going to have to, it's something where he's going to have to sit down with the coaching staff and the folks that do video and realize how he can maximize his output on the ice time that he's getting, because, the team is certainly better when they can disperse those minutes. And, he's going to be a big part of that. They have to get him going. I don't think it's time to hit the panic button on Ty Smith yet. But certainly, look, there's depth on this team now. So, that as much as you say you don't want to hit the panic button on that, I think, he's already seen that, if his play struggles, I mean, they have options that they can put in the lineup, to replace him. And that goes for a few of the guys on that back end.
So, Neal, people can catch you at Inside Hockey. You wrote a couple things within the past week. Love to see you writing Devils stuff again. So you have the Jack piece, and then a couple of just like kind of a little recap of the season there. Do you have anything you want to promote, or anything coming up? What's on the docket for Neal McHale?
Yeah, well, that's the big one right now. We'll have a few more things on just looking into the Devils core and kind of talking about some of the things that we had talked about tonight in terms of the Devils being a destination place. I don't think this is the end of it. I've spoken to quite a few people in the industry, and they think that this really, the Jack Hughes, the Dougie Hamilton, everything that's kind of gone on. You can even go back to drafting Luke Hughes and how much excitement that brought to the fans. It's really given quite a shot in this arm, and this is a very confident New Jersey Devils team. So we'll have some things on that. I think that will be a fun piece to do. And then we're also going to revisit some things this year with the 2011-12 Devils team, which would be, the team that made it all the way to the Cup final, losing in 6 games to the Kings. Yeah, so we'll catch up with some players from that roster as well. So that'll be some fun stuff to do. And so I would tell people that are interested in my work to keep an eye. That stuff will be sprinkled throughout this year.
Yeah, and we'll definitely we'll give you the good old retweet when we see those pieces, because we gotta. I love that 2012 team, so I'll definitely be reading that, and I'll definitely send it out to our viewers. But Neal McHale, we got you. You're back. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll have you on again soon.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Neal, and come visit us at Taj Lounge 973 before the game.
Yeah,
one of these days.
973. I said 973.
Absolutely. Shoot me a text. I'll be there.
Okay. All right, we'll do. We'll get you all the catfish and lobster tails available.
All right, guys.
All right. Thanks, Neal. That is Neal McHale of Inside Hockey. You can find him on InsideHockey.com. Nick, should we transition over to our next guest?
Let's just do it. Let's just go.
He's in the green room right now.
Let's just go.
He's in the Andy Green room right now. His name is Josh Younggren. He's from Evolving Wild. You can find him on Twitter at Evolving Wild, and his website, evolving-hockey.com. Josh, welcome to the virtual studios. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Josh, I feel like I'm still on my hair journey. I feel like you've abandoned me on your hair journey. What's going on?
No, I still have it.
Oh, you still have it. See, you've mastered the bun. I'm so bad at the bun, Josh. You're gonna have to give me lessons. Yeah.
So I kind of refused the bun for a long time, but at this point, I've had this hair. I haven't had a haircut in 4.5 years, I think.
Oof.
So like my hair is down to past it's like lower back length now. So like whenever I I try to, if I'm doing something that I would consider even close to professional, I generally will put it up just because it's a little long. But I haven't abandoned it. It's kind of been a journey of managing it and figuring out how to exactly maintain it. But it's if you have any questions, I'm all ears.
I have incredibly curly hair, which kind of makes life a little harder. But it kind of always stays shoulder length. It's been shoulder length for about a year now, so I feel like I'm there.
Yeah, I think I've reached the point at which my hair doesn't grow any longer. I think just because it kind of naturally that's where it's at. I have kind of wavy hair, but if after like a day, that's only really the day after a shower. So, or like if I shampoo. That's what we could talk. I could talk about this a long time. It's been a learning situation for me with the long hair. But I'm happy to be here. I'm glad to see you guys still rocking the long hair.
I'm doing it for now. We'll see how long. My wife keeps going back and forth between shaving it all off, and sometimes it's like, can I just trim the ends because she tells me all these girl things. Whatever. Anyway, obviously the reason I had you on was to talk about hair, but we also have to talk about contracts because you and your brother are just the kings of contracts. Your analytics are great, but your contract predictions are honestly like they've changed the game pretty much. You were so spot on this offseason with some of the deals where you were like, sorry guys, we went over by about $250,000 on an 8-year deal. My bad. Price is right this stuff. But no, I mean, so when you're looking at this Jack Hughes contract, obviously we didn't get even to prediction time, so you don't have an official prediction that I've seen. But what was your thoughts on it? You know, there's two. So before there's kind of a split between people who are like, this contract makes a lot of sense, just like general analysts, and the people who are pure analytics people who say, you know, the analytics say that this might be a lot. I understand that we're paying for future performance. Jack Hughes has had probably the weirdest start to a career I've ever seen in my life, but it still might be a lot. So where do you fall on that, Josh? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting contract. I'll get to a couple of points. I think with the contract projections anyway for us, I think actually for Hughes, I tweeted this out a little bit, but for him, because he played, I believe, 2 games, which even really less than 2 games. I mean, he played, a period in a second game or something before he got injured this year. So really, when we look at our projections, we're using kind of it's season by season data is essentially what we're using. So actually for Hughes, because he didn't really play any time this year and his age is he's still 20, I felt like our contract projections are actually a little bit more applicable still than they would have been for a player who's maybe played 25 games or something and they're, having a completely different type of year than they did last season, that kind of thing. But our projections said they were a little bit lower on what his contract ended up being. I think our most likely contract was a 6.2 million by 6-year deal. And I think his 8-year deal, I think we had a little over 7 million. So like 7.1, I think is what it was. And the thing with Hughes is he's still, there aren't a lot of contracts that have been signed that are similar to Hughes when you take into account both his history, but also his age. I mean, even just filtering down to players who are out of their entry-level deal, who are signing an extension, who aren't even 21. I mean, even looking at 21-year-olds, I looked at this before, for all the data that we have that Cap Friendly has, there's only been 44 contracts signed since 2005 for players who are forwards who are under 21 that aren't signing their entry-level deal. And if you even so then the other thing to do is I think comps is even hard because there aren't a ton of contracts that even kind of are close to his contract. I think just not even looking at performance, but just looking at the numbers in terms of cap percentage or the percentage of the I guess their cap hit against the salary cap, which is a way that we can kind of standardize over the changing salary cap. I think the most similar contract was Svechnikov's contract, but there's a lot of contracts in his range that are all 5 to 6 year deals. There is only, I think, the one that Svechnikov signed an 8-year deal, and I believe Taylor Hall back in 2012, 2013 or around there, I think with Edmonton signed a 7-year deal, and those were pretty similar length contracts. But I think the point is that it's a hard one to find a comp for because he's so young still, and he's still got 6 months until he's 21, right? And we've seen last 2 seasons, his first year he struggled a little bit, but last year we really saw Hughes, at least from our kind of a lot of our metrics, really kind of take a step forward, especially defensively. And what that ends up doing, because of the way that GMs tend to play players or pay players, a lot of that is just based on counting stats like standard points and blocks, and but really it's just points and time on ice and then age and status. So are they an RFA, UFA? How old are they? What's their position? And then have they played a lot, and do they have a lot of points? I mean, that's kind of a real simple way you can just get an idea about how GMs are generally going to be looking at players and toward paying them. And I don't think Hughes has really put up the kind of points that you would expect from a player who's going to get that kind of contract. Now, I also was saying this, and we said this a few times this summer, and I think when we were on, or when I was on your show a couple months ago, talking about Hughes in terms of our projections for him and his trajectory and kind of the line he's taking. Our projections, we had him as like the projected as going to be the 36th best player by our GAR metric, our goals above replacement metric, and going into the league. And that's a really high, I think, projection for a player who hasn't necessarily done what maybe some people think of when they think of a really, really great player. So I guess just to finish off, I think the Hughes contract, there's a lot of, I think, upside, and also essentially like the team is buying, because he's still got another probably 3 years until he's even in his prime. So they're maybe getting like 3 years of like potential value of him going to be really young, and I think that's extremely valuable for a team. But also based on his stats and his history and what GMs tend to pay, I think I can understand why some people would say it's an overpay. But I think locking down a player like him, who could potentially be a number one center on the team at an 8x8 deal right now, which is a lot less than a lot of other teams pay their top line centers, I think overall I think it's a good contract for the Devils and makes a lot of sense for them going forward.
So you talk about everything that's like positive, everything that's like positive. Oh, Sam, I'm getting a little mixed minus on there.
What?
I don't know what that is, Nick.
Josh, can you? I think something's coming through your mic. Can you mute, bro?
Through my? Yours? Oh, yeah. One sec.
Now it's gone.
Okay. Anyway, sorry about that. Sometimes we just got to do the live thing. But you talk about a lot of the positives with the contract and a lot of the reasons why he should do it. But is there a risk? Is there an inherent risk in here that you see?
I think with risk, the only thing I think the obvious one is just like injuries. I think that's going to be the big risk with a player like him. And he was out for a month, I think, this year.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's hard with a player who's 20 who. I think who only has 2 seasons, right, and now is on their 3rd season, and they maybe miss some time here. The only real risk would be potential injuries, but also that you're maybe just he isn't what the team thinks he's going to be in the next 3 or 4 years. Because ultimately, the team is getting control of the player like that, and he's their top line center going forward, and into his prime. I think the prime for forwards is usually, we sometimes like to say, sometimes somewhere between the 24 to 26 age range. And I think the Devils are going to have him for, like, already he's a very serviceable player. And I think we have him becoming an extremely good center in the next couple of years. I think that's probably a fair statement to say just based on his trajectory. The risk, I think, like I said, it's really just, is he going to be able to play like a top line center in terms of his time on ice? And if you're worried about injuries, that could potentially be a negative aspect there. But I think overall, like the risk would be, and I didn't get a chance to look into the full cap structure of the Devils in the next couple of years. So maybe there's some issues that creates a logjam in their cap, or they have some other players that they need to sign. That's maybe going to make it difficult, especially after having signed Hamilton for his contract and some other young players that are going to be coming due here. But I think overall, I don't really see the risk as much as I do see it'll be kind of the uncertainty of is he actually going to be the kind of top line center in the league that the Devils maybe think he's going to be. And I'm more optimistic that that'll be the case.
So I feel like a lot of Jack Hughes's issues have come because of a lack of great wingers. He doesn't really. He was playing with Igor Sharangovich last year and Yanni Kuokkanen, who without him this year have been not very good. But you were talking about Jesper Bratt, who's been playing with Dawson Mercer, and they've been just a phenomenal combination. And his numbers are through the roof, both analytically and a lot of his counting stats are up there. Finally, he got off to a slow start. but once you got with Janssen and Mercer, they've skyrocketed. Do you see Jesper Bratt as being a guy that you could put on a line with Hughes, and then they're together, for good? Is that something that you see, or is that something that needs time?
I think well, so I will be upfront here is that I can't say over the past year or two I've watched a lot of Jesper Bratt. I think it's having been a Wild fan in mostly the Central kind of division, watching a lot of the West Coast and Central games. But just based on our numbers and kind of based on we had him projected as the second best player in the Devils heading this season. Bratt we did, and Hughes we had as the first best player. Now Hamilton, I think, would have probably, this is kind of before free agency, so before redoing the teams, but he's still probably, I think, based on our projections, we had him as a top 3 player heading into the league. I think it was kind of funny. We had a tweet that was like, oh, I didn't realize how good Bratt was. Like, that was kind of the tweet, having looked into the Devils a little bit more, and he's off to a good year this year as well. I think Mercer is also a really interesting player because I think right now, looking at rookies, which I believe he is a rookie, like he's kind of like leading some of our metrics in terms of the race for like rookie of the year, almost like the Calder. Ooh. So that's another interesting player that I think is off to a really, really good year. And like you said, they're playing well together. I think Brad is definitely the kind of player that would be a top line winger on any team, I think, going forward. I think a lot of it, though, in terms of how it fit and structure, I hesitate to really comment on that because some of the systems aspects and the chemistry there, I think, is more of kind of goes outside of, it's more on the coaching aspect and some scouting aspects and like maybe play style, which I don't really feel that well versed, or at least enough to talk about opinions there. But just based on all the numbers we have, he's a very solid forward. And I think going forward, again, he's still 23, I think. And I think there's still plenty of time like there of just solid play from a player like that. So,
you mentioned Dougie Hamilton. His season's been ridiculous. Like I didn't expect to see this from him. I knew he was good. I knew the analytics say he was really good. I knew he's been on teams with really good defenses. So we haven't seen him ever on a team where he's the guy. He had Giordano in Calgary. He had a plethora. You had Slavin and a couple other guys in Carolina where he's never been the top dog. And you knew he was going to go and become a top dog this offseason because Carolina, didn't value him like other teams would. And the Devils came in and they paid for his services, and it made a lot of sense. He's a right-handed defenseman. He's very offensive-minded. He's somebody who, he's still valuable in his own end. But he's doing things. He honestly, watching every game, I see a Norris-level defender out there. He's lifted Ryan Graves up to be a top-line defenseman when he was in Colorado, and nobody could really, he was good in Colorado, but nobody took him to a top-line defenseman. And he played a lot with Cale Makar, who's somebody who's also considered the best in the league. So are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? As somebody who's, very down the middle, doesn't, I know the Devils are your other favorite team, obviously. But somebody who's looking at this from an unbiased point of view and sees this player come on the ice and completely, like, the Devils' defense is a strength now when it's been a weakness for 5 years. So are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing, where this is a Norris-level defender right now?
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to remember exactly what I said when I was on your show back in, I don't remember when it was, but Hamilton was easily the best player available in the free agency this offseason, and we've had him. I think it almost feels a little funny just to keep saying this, is that he's been kind of the, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, like a lot of people who've been doing a lot of data work and research and like kind of these models. Hamilton has been the player that's consistently one of the best defensemen in the league for the last 4 years, and that's just how it's been. And so it wasn't. We projected him to, I think, maybe be the second best, or maybe third. I think right now I would consider him as one of the top 3 defensemen in the league. And I think that was the same last year and this offseason, along with Cale Makar and Charlie McAvoy, I think I would put. And maybe Adam Fox is in the conversation. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 other players, but and some of that is age. But I think it was almost like, having seen his results in Jersey on the Devils this year, compared to what I was expecting based on our projections, it was just funny because I was like, well, I'm not even really surprised that he's this good, because this is exactly what he's been like for the last 3 years or 4 years. And I think a lot of people just didn't really understand exactly, maybe because he wasn't given, like you mentioned, those the top pair top power play unit, like those kind of responsibilities, he was still playing a ton of minutes. He wasn't injured very much, and he was one of the best defensemen, if not, I mean, there's an argument he probably should have won a Norris in the last year or two already. So I think this year it's not that surprising. His offense has just been insane this year. And like, that's really the thing. I think that he's always driven both sides of the ice, but this year specifically, just his play driving offensively has just been kind of on another level. And I think that to answer your question, I'm seeing everything that you guys are seeing, and he looks just as good as it sounds like he's been on the ice. You know, that from our metrics and our models, I mean, that's just that's what he's doing again, which is what we've seen for years now.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is I've seen some Dougie Hamilton, but he's just not like, he was never a guy that, like, you know, you're circling Connor McDavid, you're circling Cal McCarr, you're circling Carlson, like Eric Carlson, like people like that. And I just feel like Hamilton wasn't a guy I was circling. I knew he was there. I remember the impact that it had on Carolina when he broke his leg that one year, and how they kind of just didn't play up to snuff. And then he tried to force his way back in the playoffs. But it just always seemed like this guy got a rap for being traded. Maybe he didn't get along with people in Boston. But when you look at the trade from Calgary to Carolina, you know, Calgary's getting Noah Hannafin in that trade, and Lindholm's in that trade. So there's a lot going on in that trade, you know. So it's not like Dougie Hamilton got traded for peanuts. It's not like he's Evander Kane. You know what I mean? Like, that's what people are kind of like assessing him to. And I just feel like it was a silly argument, and I feel like the Devils are just in a much better position. Like, I literally saw people say the Hurricanes aren't going to miss Dougie Hamilton because Tony DeAngelo is here, and it's the same player, and it's just like, what? The assessment is insane.
Yeah, I think one of the things with teams that have a lot of good defensemen, I think, is that they just kind of, like Carolina has for years, one of the best blue line, you know, one of the best defenseman groups in the league, and it's one of those things where it's like when you have all those good, you know, I can kind of relate to this as a Wild fan who for years the Wild have had one of the best, like, also defensive groups in the league in, you know, Spurgeon, Brodin, back when Suter was a couple years younger, Dumba, like their top four, like you kind of forget like somebody like Brodin is like as good as he is in a way. But I think with Hamilton, it's almost like a certain amount of like that classic, just undervalued player because of things that are off the ice or things that we don't really know about, or personality, or maybe like the way that they kind of jive with the team, is everything that I always really got when he was with Calgary and when he's with Carolina. And I think it's just something that now it seems like the Devils are kind of all, I mean, obviously before he was just a defenseman who was good, and now he's a defenseman that was paid like a number one defenseman. And so it's kind of solidified him as, I think, this, people know who he is. He's kind of he's a commodity that people understand. And I think just watching him, and when you give him all the responsibility, like he's been like that for years now, but it's just something where I think it can be easy to overlook that when you have a lot of good defensemen. Unlike, I'm not trying to be critical of the Devils, but not maybe the best group of defensemen historically, like, and then you bring in somebody like Hamilton who immediately just makes your top pair like one of the best, or what, you know, he's that kind of player. So I don't know, it's funny. I almost feel like I'm heaping too much praise on him at this point, and but that's just kind of who he's been, and I think it's. I guess I will say it's a little bit nice to see that trend continue, because he's got, you know, he's starting to get. I don't know. It's funny to say he's 28 and he's getting old, right? But like, you know, he's into his early 30s, right? He eventually he'll fall off a little bit, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon. And I think going forward, he's going to be a huge part of the Devils, like, you know, like just the team overall, not just their blue line.
That's wonderful. So before I let you go, you know, we're getting to the end of the podcast, and I do want to give you some time to kind of promote all you're doing in Evolving Hockey, but what's your just quick assessment of the Devils in general? Like, it's been kind of a weird, disjointed season for them. They're literally the best team in the world one night and literally unwatchable the next. So I'm trying to figure out where my expectations should be. So where would you think the fans should have their expectations right now?
Yeah, I think the Devils, I mean, they were our off season. We were a bit out of left field, I think, for some people who thought like, oh, we were over projecting for the Devils, but right now, actually, compared to like our preseason projections, I think we have them. They've dropped maybe 3 standing points compared to our original preseason projections, and they're maybe down 10% in playoff probabilities from where before the season started. One of the things I think is clear is losing your top line center for a month is like that's going to hurt any team. And like when you have to kind of rearrange players, but they've also had, like I mentioned, Mercer has kind of, I think I've said this on here before, but I'm not a prospects guy, so I'm not quite sure where he was ranked in the farm system. But all kind of early indications are that he's kind of come in and done a really good job. So I think the Devils are still a really solid team, but the big issue is the Metro is maybe even more difficult than we initially thought. Like the division itself is just there are so many good teams that are vying, and there's a couple teams that are maybe better than we thought they were going to be. Like I think heading into the season, and that even just a team like the Blue Jackets, where we didn't think they were going to be anything, and they were kind of having like a fairly okay season. So I think the bigger thing is the Devils, from what I can see, is kind of like they're doing what we thought they were going to do, but the Metro is really, really hard. And I think it depends on, I think the Blue Jackets are kind of likely to fall off a little bit more. I still don't really understand how Philly is still they're kind of now, but they had their couple weeks of winning and, with some of their weird offseason moves. So I don't know. I think the Devils with Hughes coming back, and I just think talking about Hamilton and some of the other good players, they're still a team that I could see very much in the hunt for a playoff spot, but it's just such a hard division that it's really hard to say that with certainty, considering I think, like, if I just look at our team projections right now, we only have one team in the Metro that we have with more than a 90% chance to make the playoffs, and every other team is below that because of how close the division is. So it's just tough. It's a tough division.
Washington?
No, I think right now it's Carolina. We have Carolina at 94%. Actually, I should just say both the Capitals are basically 90% right now to make the playoffs.
Okay.
But I mean, that just, for both those teams not being up higher, I think that just speaks to the fact of how tough a division is. So it's a little bit of a bummer, I think, for us now with our newfound Devils fandom to then have the Metro be one of the issues that the Devils are facing.
Unfortunately, it's going to be fun though, because I think that the race for the Metro is going to come down to the last month. I really do. I think in April, all the teams are going to – unless Columbus or Philly or one of them falls apart, which is possible, an injury here or just falling back to the pack. I think that these 8 teams are going to be vying for position, at least I think the top 3 – I got to see what the Rangers are going to be, because, Shesterkin is just playing out of his mind, and I got to see what – Carolina's goalies have been playing out of their mind too, and they're just getting top to bottom destruction play from everybody. But just looking at where the Islanders are, I can't expect them to stay crappy. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe COVID's gonna knock them out. But there's just a lot going on with this division. It's just wild.
Yeah. And I think one of the things is that it's still kind of playing out like what we thought, I think, with the Metro, in that it's just like really tough. We were still, we joke about this, but we've not liked the Islanders for years. And this is the only year that we've actually been like so far kind of like right in that. They've overperformed basically almost all the public models over the last like 3 or 4 years. So this year, finally, there were a few actually that were a little bit higher on the Islanders this year than historically. And then this is the year that the Islanders actually turn out to be kind of like more in line with what the models were saying as being under them. But yeah, the Metro is hard. I think the only thing that really is pretty clear is that the Hurricanes and the Capitals are very strong teams. And then I think there's, even the Rangers have been they started out really not that great from a lot of their shot metrics and were really carried by Shesterkin, but then now in the recent trends, they're now playing really well. So it's just going to be, I think, a big fight towards the end. But it'll be extremely entertaining for us non-Devils. I guess technically, even though I'm a bit of a Devils fan, I'm still more watching the Wild, I think, a little bit more. So it'll be kind of fun just from an entertainment standpoint to watch the Metro and see where everything shakes out.
So, Josh, you're starting a lot of new projects. I feel like your entire life is just a new project over at Evolving Hockey.
Yeah.
You had a couple finished. You have a bunch of new stuff on the site. The site is looking great, by the way. But what do you got to promote? What's new this season? And I know you were talking about a project you were working on last week. I don't know if that's finished or you're still working in progress. But what's coming up?
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. We've done quite a bit, I think, in the last 6 months. But I think some people have seen this on Twitter or seen it on the site. But if you're into fantasy hockey, we just released some in-season projections and stuff that kind of is for analysis for evaluating how players are doing based on where we expected and kind of their over underperforming aspects. So go check that out. That's under our tools tab on the site. And then recently, I think we've moved a little bit into, I think the end of the year, we wanted to fill out our glossary a little bit more. So we've been adding a lot of like write-ups and more definitions. And we have kind of also our own podcast, but we've started a series there just covering some general hockey stats, kind of glossary terms, like, refresher stuff maybe for some people, but we'll eventually get into a lot more of our advanced, what you might call like our goals above replacement model, our RAPL model, or regularized adjust plus minus model, contract projections, all this stuff. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. I guess I'll plug, I don't know, we're new to this. You guys have been doing this for a while, but I think we're on episode like 13 of our podcast. So it's just called the Evolving Hockey Podcast. It's with me, my brother, and Sean Ferris. And it's weekly. So check that out. Not to take, I don't know if it's acceptable to promote a podcast, another podcast, but that's kind of our new.
Promote the podcast. Tweet the podcast.
Are you kidding me?
Listen, if you got some devil things on there, we'll retweet the podcast. Listen, Josh, we love competition here. We keep the enemies close here at the Let's Go Devils podcast. We make sure that we're friendly with you, and then like as soon as you turn around, I'm gonna hit you with the WWE title belt. All right, but just so you know, you come for the king. I'm gonna shake your hand. I'm gonna be like, yes, it's so gracious to have you in our country. And you'll learn. Yeah, eventually I'll know when you're inviting me to your podcast. I'll be like, oh, okay, this is where I got shot in the shoulder a little bit just to send a message. But that's okay. Because you take the positives with the negatives.
It's been kind of funny.
So go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's for years I feel like I've been guest on podcasts and whatnot, and now I'm kind of running one, or me and my brother are running one, and it's like I'm learning all of the things that everyone who's hosted me has to do, and all the kind of hidden time it takes to do a lot of this stuff, and how you just like don't ever realize that as somebody who just like, oh, do you want to pop on? Yeah, here's the time. Okay, cool. Start, stop. You're done. There's no anything outside of it, and it's just been kind of a funny journey, I think, for us, and we're still, but yeah, we try not to cover any team too specifically as to avoid competing with any of the specific team podcasts. So it's just kind of the whole league. I think that's one of our approaches is just covering a lot of player evaluation across a lot of and team evaluation across the whole NHL. But anyway, yeah, that's I'll stop there with my plugs. And then also, if you do want to check out our website, we have a lot of stuff or metrics and models and projections and I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff. But check it out, and you can subscribe through the login button if you want. We have a lot of offers there too. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. And it's been fun talking about my favorite team, the Devils.
Yes,
absolutely. And just remember one thing. Remember one thing about podcast etiquette. The Devils will always beat everybody, including the Wild, tomorrow.
Ooh, shots fired. Listen,
I will listen. Watching both teams from a kind of I feel like they'll balance out things a little bit, and it'll be just for entertainment's sake for for a first in a while. So yeah, I'm excited.
It'll be a fun game. Tomorrow's going to be a fun game. But Josh, thank you so much for coming on. Evolving-hockey.com, the Evolving Wild podcast. Make sure you check both of those out. Hit the subscribe button, guys. And thanks so much again, Josh, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to chat again.
All right, thanks, Josh. That is Josh Younggren, Evolving Hockey, evolving-hockey.com, at Evolving Wild. Here on the State of the Fan Address, Let's Go Devils podcast. We didn't talk that much today, Nick.
I like these shows, Sam. I don't got to do much.
Yeah, we just sit here and hang out and do our thing, right? But we're actually
I told my wife
the
end of the month sometimes, especially in these holiday months where I'm expected to be a family man of some sorts. I tend to fall behind in the articles. So the last couple days of November were you probably noticed there was a lot of content out there by me. So I was trying to catch up on a couple of deadlines.
It's kind of like a police quota, end of the month, you better not be speeding.
I'm giving them parking tickets like it's candy. By the way, I got a parking ticket. I'm going to tell a quick story. So I got called for jury duty for the first time in my life. And I had to do jury duty. It was wild because I came home from Thanksgiving. I went to Chicago to see a couple friends. And, I work overnights. So I got home, went to work, and then went to jury duty. I was very tired. And I paid $20 to park for jury duty. I was like, this is not my favorite. Didn't like that part. And then they still gave me a parking ticket for something wrong. They didn't like something about my license plate. I still don't understand. I was very mad, Sam, that I paid $20 for parking, and they still gave me a parking ticket. This is wild.
Well, you know what? We'll talk about that off air, but that's just like, it's kind of entrapment.
Yeah.
Is that the
I feel
terminology?
It's like when have you ever seen like the guys, they put their stick down and then like they've seen this happen to a couple times the Devils' season where all they did was put their stick down and you see the guy change direction to trip themselves over the stick, get an infraction. I feel like that's what happened. Yeah. I got somebody tripped themselves over my stick and they just found a way to get a penalty even though I did everything right.
Kind of like Ryan Reeve and PK Subban just tripped over his own skate. I'm just kidding. Just joking. Just joking. It's the ice at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. But anyway, but Sam, I think that's it. I think we hit up everything. There's still a lot, I'll do a quick plug, pucksandpitchforks.com. Dan Rice had his piece go up today. He talked to Steven Gianta. Steven Gianta is with the Lightning now. He's a scout for them. He's got 2 rings. He asked him if you have anything to do with Blake Coleman. Blake Coleman coming there. So that answer's in there. We have mine, David Holliday, both have some opinion pieces on the Jack Hughes contract. And there's a couple interesting things in the site. You wrote something about taking the show on the road, about the Florida trip. Yeah. Sam's back, guys. Sam's back.
That's that quota at the end of the month.
Listen,
you're like, Sam, you haven't done one in like 2 months.
And then Vinny Parisi has his piece on Andreas Johnson. I don't know if it's Johnson or Janssen. I give up. I'm going to say Janssen because that's what I've been saying.
It's Andre Johnson.
Okay, sure.
He used to play for the Houston Texans.
But the chemistry that Janssen and Brad have found together, he's got a piece up there. That's a good one. We got pieces on pieces on pieces. So we got a lot of content right now. We're gonna get more content over the next couple of days. And Sam, did you see? Did you see what I tweeted? I don't think you saw it. You didn't make a mention of it to me. The list is done, Sam.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. I did see it.
The top 50 Devils of all time. I think, you know what, Sam? I think we need to have an adjourning podcast for this. We need to have a special Woo report where it's you and me. Or we just talk about this list. That's what I think. I don't know. Maybe I'll talk. Maybe I'll try to find a guest. Maybe we'll have some fun. I think we should do that list a couple years ago.
Well, I wanted to ask you, but I don't know if this is an appropriate place to ask. But next week we have Devils Flyers in this time slot. We'll have to figure that one out as well, because last week the preemption, people were begging for the State of the Fan address. I get the private message. Nick Chalk, you're one of them. He was begging. I can't find it. I was like,
next week I'll be here. Last week though, we had a couple scheduling difficulties, we'll say, and so that's my fault.
Which is rare, Sam. Which is rare because we rarely take nights off. Very rare. And when it happens, there's a good reason.
I was literally on an aeroplane at podcast time. So it was.
That's not an excuse.
We tried to make it work. We tried to make it work.
In-flight Wi-Fi, and I'll plug you in. I'll make it work.
Oh, Sam, I was on Spirit Airlines. Ain't no Wi-Fi on Spirit Airlines. Man, I was lucky that they didn't, make me sit in the aisle.
Yeah. Oh boy.
No, but and I definitely just ruined any possible Spirit Airlines advertisement that we're going to get. But that's okay.
Oh, that's
okay.
That's fine.
We'll
That's fine. I wouldn't want our fans going on that airline.
Anyway,
Start losing them.
But Sam,
anyway.
I had fun tonight. We got a Jack Hughes for 8 more years. 8 more years of talking about Jack Hughes, and we'll work out the rest of the logistics later.
Yes, we definitely will. Also, before we go, Getty27 on the YouTube Live says 2-0 Utica. Schmidt with the with another shutout back to back for him. Oh,
nice.
does the pipeline look good? Yeah, the pipeline looks excellent here in New Jersey. The Hughes era has officially begun. Long-term deal. Devils have back-to-back Thursday and Friday against Minnesota and those Winnipeg Jets going into Canada. And Corey Massac confirmed that Mackenzie Blackwood will be making the trip, let's just say. All right, so thank everybody for coming. Thank you to Neal McHale. Get him scheduled at Tops Lounge 973. Also, Josh Younggren, Evolving Hockey at Evolving Wild. Plugging away. So long, Nick. So long, everybody. This is the State of the Fan Address. Till next time, let's go Devils.